So hey anime fans, the series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Female Kyuubi, so let's start the series. It was early autumn in the ninja village of Konoha, also known as the Hidden Leaf Village, which was well known for its strong shinobi, its hiddenness in a forest of trees, and the good nature of its residents. It produced a number of notable shinobi, including the Senju brothers, Hashirama, Tobirama, who were the first and second Hokage, respectively, Hiruzen Sarutobi, the third Hokage, and the sensei of the legendary Sannin, also known as the God of Shinobi, and Minato Namikaze, the fourth and current Hokage, who was known as the Yellow Flash because of his Hiraishin no Jutsu. There were other ninja who weren't Hokage, but were just as well known, including Kakashi Hatake, Jiraiya the Toad Sage, Tsunade Senju, Asuma Sarutobi, and others. Among the top 5 shinobi villages in the whole elemental countries, Konoha is ranked first, followed by Kyuumo in second place, Iwa in third, Suna in fourth, and Kiri, which is now engaged in a civil war, in fifth place. However, on October 10th, the Kyuubi no Kitsune attacked Konoha, tearing it from its host, Kushina Uzumaki, formerly of Yuzushiogakure. After the village was destroyed, the fox, under the influence of a masked man, went on the rampage, killing the midwives, breaking through an S-rank barrier jutsu, and somehow killing the elite ANBU security detail before taking one of the twin children hostage. After saving his wife and kids, Minato Namikaze fought the masked man and injured him. He then gave up control of the Kyuubi and forced the intruder to go. Then, with the fox still out of control, Minato had to make the hardest and most painful choice of his life, resealing the Ninetales into one of his twin children. After a minute of deliberation and with time running out, he chose to seal the Kyuubi into his daughter Shinri, but the village was still being devastated by significant amounts of the Kyuubi's chakra. He made a pseudo Jinchuriki by sealing the extra chakra into his son Naruto because he knew he couldn't risk breaking Shinri's seal because of the chance of the fox emerging. By some miracle, Minato and his spouse made it through the trauma, and both parents are delighted to be with their kids. Naturally, they now had to deal with the most important query from the village council, elders, and peasants. Who is the Kyuubi's container? The couple initially intended to tell them the truth, but they were aware of the death and devastation brought about by the Kyuubi's rampage, and they knew that the villagers and the elders would stop at nothing to make the Jinchuriki miserable. Then came the terrible idea of their young daughter being raped and tortured. Therefore, they announced that Naruto was the Jinchuriki with a heavy heart, knowing that their son would lead a good life without many friends. The elders and village council, with the exception of the shinobi clans, without the Uchiha head, called for the young boy to be killed or turned into a weapon, which was exactly what they feared would happen. In the view of Kushina Uzumaki and the fourth Hokage, Konoha's reputation was destroyed here. Naturally, this didn't stop them from trying to hurt the young blonde, but Minato quickly put an end to both attempts and ruled that the older generation could not inform the younger generation about Naruto's Jinchuriki status. For 4 years, the Uzumaki/Namikaze family lived in harmony until Minato and Kushina decided to teach Shinri how to use the Kyuubi's chakra. For some reason, they never gave Naruto the same training and consistently turned down his requests. At first, the neglect wasn't that bad, but it got worse over time. Then, as Minato and Kushina are training their daughter, Naruto's parents and sister further isolated themselves from their almost forgotten family member. 7-year-old Shinri Uzumaki Namikaze, who shared her mother's red eyes, was occupied with directing chakra into her palm, which started to rotate until it formed a revolving ball. She exclaimed, "Yes! I did it! I finally did it, with joy at having mastered the Rasengan, one of her father's signature jutsus. Her parents grinned at her, clearly proud of her. Nice work, Shinri-chan, replied Minato. Keep this up and you'll be able to become a great ninja like me and your mother. As her parents went by and gave her a hug or a peck on the cheek, Shinri grinned. Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, a boy the same age as his sister, was watching this from the top of a tree. He had the same kind of hair as his father, including the bangs, with red tips, and his eyes were the same color and shape as his mother's, but the rest of his face was like his father's. He was dressed in black pants and black sandals and a mesh shirt underneath a green hooded sweatshirt that was unzipped. The young boy could only watch with sadness, wishing he could have been a part of that family moment, but he was not because his parents neglected his younger sister, who was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, who was unknown to the rest of the village. He repeatedly asked his parents if they could train him because he possessed some of the fox's chakra, but they turned him away each time. The last time didn't go well because his parents caught him doing an advanced chakra exercise and scolded him, using many hurtful words that no child should hear from a parent. He was sent to his room after receiving the reprimand, and once inside, he sobbed uncontrollably and asked Kami why everything was unfair to him. However, his suffering didn't stop there. Every time he left the house, the villagers would either glare at him, insult him, spat at him, or, on a dozen occasions, try to get him. This occurred as a result of his father formally announcing Naruto as the fox's Jinchuriki, a fact that the man detested. Naruto sighed at that. He may not have been the fox's container, but he did contain a bijou. You see, Minato, Kushina, and everyone else in Konoha didn't anticipate that the fox's excess chakra would actually form into a completely new entity, which, based on Naruto's feelings of wanting love and attention from his family, became his first and only friend. Naruto grinned subtly as he recalled how he had met his friend. He had been crying in the corner when he passed out and entered his mindscape following a harsh reprimand from his parents. A flashback from 1.5 years ago, the mindscape of Naruto. When Naruto woke up, he was in a forest with trees that appeared to be as tall as 10-story buildings. The trees were rusty red in color, with green on the branches, and they were far too high for him to reach. Stunned, he pinched himself to check if he was dreaming, but was startled when he felt it. Whoa, this is truly strange, he thought to himself as he searched the area, hoping to see whether anyone else was present. He heard birdsong as he strolled into the woodland, and the music soothed him. However, a new and heartbreaking sound caught his attention. Following the sound out of childish curiosity, Naruto soon discovered a small clearing with a black and furry form curled up in a ball in the center. He then heard the whimpering sound again, this time coming from the ball, and cautiously approached it. He knelt down and reached for the whimpering ball, and as soon as his fingers touched it, it sprung, exposing itself to be a wolf pup. What astonished him, though, was what it did next. The wolf pup's words, "Ah. Who are you?" caused the animal to blink several times. The blonde yelled, "AHH," as he leaped into the air and landed on his ass. "Why, you just talked," he exclaimed, gesturing to the dog, who gave him a small scowl. "Of course I can talk. Got a problem with it?" Naruto continued to stare at the wolf pup, unsure of how to respond. He spoke to the wolf, "What are you? And why were you crying?" When he answered, "Because I'm all alone," the pup's eyes appeared to sparkle with tears. "No one is here except me," he added. As Naruto carefully made his way back to the puppy, his heart wrenched. he inquired. How long have you been here? The blonde's eyes widened in surprise as he replied, since after the day your father the excess chakra from the fox into you. He inquired, how much do you know about the Kyuubi? And the puppy gave a little sniffle. The chakra the fourth Hokage sealed in you also had his memories, said the wolf, when he was created by the Rikudo-san Nin, to the day he attacked your village, when that Ningen sealed the chakra. What he didn't know was that it had gathered some of the first of your chakra, and the chakra of a wolf that happened to be passing through. Thus I was conceived. Are you saying you're some sort of bijou? Naruto asked, his eyes widening. Sorta, said the wolf, and when I was born, I found myself here, alone, without the love of a parent or anything. Naruto watched the wolf pup with pity as it began to cry once more. Because he reminded him of himself, he could somehow identify with this sad tiny. He questioned, do you have a name? And the dog shook his head. No, since no one is here to give me one. The blonde took up the wolf pup and hugged it after Naruto did something that startled the young pup. He caressed its fur and remarked, I understand how it feels to be alone. How would you know? The dog replied, you have your parents and your sister. My family doesn't see me that way anymore, Naruto stated, startling the wolf pup once again. They all agreed I'm not worth their time, and so they excluded me as their family, he continued, his eyes taking on a sorrowful expression. The dog responded, sounds like you really don't like them, and the blonde nodded his head no. I don't hate them, in fact I love them all very much, stated Naruto. I just wish they see me as their son/brother, and not as a nuisance. Naruto gazed at the puppy and could only grin as it curled up in the boy's arms, but the dog remained silent as it found solace in his embrace. The wolf pup nodded as he remarked, you said you didn't have a name, right? Then how about I give you one, he suggested. The dog became excited at that, and he stammered, why you'd really do that? Naruto grinned broadly at him. He exclaimed, of course. Everybody needs a name, and the dog could only stare in disbelief. Now what to call you? He asked. The blonde started to mentally list the names he was familiar with, and then one struck him, making him smile. He said, Kibo, yes, that sounds right, and the dog gave him an owly gaze. Naruto gazed down as the now-named wolf pup asked, Kibo? Yeah, it means hope that someday we'll be seen as family, Naruto replied. You like it? I like it, Kibo said with an expression that Naruto assumed was the wolf equivalent of shyness. End of flashback. After recalling that event, Naruto opened his eyes to see his family returning inside as night fell. A year and a few months had passed since that day, and he was glad to have a genuine relationship with someone, even if that someone was a young bijou. Speaking of which, Kibo had developed significantly since they discovered that he had absorbed chakra through the seal. He was now 3 tails strong, and they estimated that he would eventually reach 9 tails strength because he was essentially the fox's son. At the age of 12, Naruto and Kibo also perfected the bijou cloak, in which Kibo's chakra was green rather than the corrosive red and black of the fox. His thoughts were cut off as Kibo spoke through their telepathic link, even though it still hurt but not as much as the fox's. The wolf bijou asked, are you sure it was a good idea not to leave them a note? 2 weeks ago, following another village attack, the two decided they needed to find a place to hide while they trained and prepared for the academy. Naturally, Naruto's family was trying to stop him, so he chose to do it covertly. If they notice that I'm gone or where I'm going to be living for the next few years, they'll send ANBU after me, Naruto remarked, with a melancholy thought. You know, you could have told them about me, then they could have trained you along with your sister, said the wolf, sighing. It doesn't matter, besides, I doubt they would believe me, even if I did tell them, was all Naruto could say. Kibo was only able to stare at his container with sadness at that point. Naruto and his family were having trouble, and he stopped communicating to them out of fear of being scolded or punished. He didn't provide any advice on where they should go because he knew they would choose Shinri's idea over his. Since he believed it was best to remain silent, he trained outside of the village, out of the Anbu's and his family's sight and ears. However, the locals were becoming increasingly brazen and violent, attacking him while he was only a few blocks from his house. He was able to escape with minor injuries, though. As Naruto put a rucksack on his shoulders that contained only food rations, a few bottles of water, and some clothing, he said to his host, "It's time for us to go. I'm still not privy about the place you picked for us to hide in," Kibo stated, sounding apprehensive. "There's a reason why they call it the Forest of Death, you know." As he bounced from tree to tree, Naruto's face displayed an expression of certainty. Kibo's brows narrowed as he continued, "Therefore, no one will be foolish enough to search for us in there." Kibo attempted to argue, but Naruto persisted, saying, "And why wouldn't they? That place is a virtual hellhole and death trap. Even the Anbu think twice before going in that accursed place." The wolf's jaw expanded and closed like a gaping fish as he said, "We're going in there, and that's final," and then it sighed. He remarked, "You're nuts, seriously, you are," and Naruto laughed. "It's who I am, Kibo," he replied. "You should know that." "That's what worries me," said the youthful Bijou, with a deadpan expression. As he hurried to their objective, Naruto merely laughed. Little did they know that many blurs were after them. Half an hour later, beyond the boundary fence of Training Ground 44, also known as the Forest of Death. "I still think this a bad idea," Kibo remarked as they reached the notorious Training Grounds barrier. "Are you a mouse or a wolf? The animals would probably leave us alone because they can sense your chakra," Naruto continued, adding that the only thing we need to worry about is that crazy snake girl who lives here. The wolf continued, "That doesn't mean that there are few animals in there who are bold enough to attack us," but before Naruto could respond, they both sensed chakra signatures approaching. Naruto concluded, "Anbu, 4 of them, and that one of them is Nico One-chan." Kibo asked, "You mean that pretty Anbu girl?" and Naruto gave his surrogate brother a mental frown. "Now's not the time, Kibo," Naruto said as the Anbu entered the area. One of them, sporting a white cat mask with red markings and long purple hair. The Anbu asked, "Naruto, what are you doing out here?" as Naruto continued to face the fence with a dejected expression on his face. Yugao Yuzuki remarked, "I'm sorry One-chan, but I need to be away from the village and my family for a little while," much to the woman's surprise. She was unaware that the villagers' treatment of him was so severe and that his parents were abandoning him over his sister. "Naruto, please listen to me," the captain of the Anbu begged. "Whatever is happening at home between you and your family, you can talk to me about it, but for now, let's get you home." At that word, Naruto's eyes glistened with tears. He said, "Home, I wish that place did felt like home," which confused Yugao and the other members of her team. "But I guess I'm not wanted or needed there, since no one there wants to give me even an ounce of love," Yugao stated. At this, Yugao's eyes enlarge. "Naruto, please. Don't talk like that," she says. Naruto made a hand sign with his hands and just grinned pitifully. "Sorry Ne-chan," he replied, "but I need to do this, Kage Bunshin no Jutsu." To the ANBU's surprise, 7 flawless replicas of the small kid materialized in 7 puffs of smoke. One team member exclaimed in surprise, "En nanny Kage Bunshin," as the others responded in kind. "But he's not even in the academy yet. How can he know such an advanced jutsu?" Before turning to face the team, and Yugao in particular, Naruto rubbed his neck and said, "Well, I sorta broke into the vault where the forbidden scroll and copied the directions for the jutsu," laughing. "Tell mom and dad I don't hate them One-chan, and tell them I don't Shinri, tell them, despite everything they did, I still love them," he said. Naruto and the clones then leaped into the forest with a chakra-infused leap. The final member yelled, "Shit! What do we do?" Yugao, who knew that one of the best uses for the Kage Bunshin was to use them to divert any assailants from the original's path, bit a curse. She turned to one of her subordinates and ordered her to go grab Tenzo and another squad. "While you're there, look for Anko, she knows this spot better than anyone." She turned to face the other 2 as the other ANBU nodded and took off. "You 2 follow him inside. Double back and attempt a different trail if the one you're on is a fake. But that place is infested with monstrous animals, bugs, and who knows what else is in there," said the 2 ANBU, who were taken aback, before they sensed that someone was trying to kill them, one of them said. Her snarl caused them to tremble a little. "Get in there, or I will slice off your legs and leave you 2 for the predators in that forest to feast on," she said. However, what will you do?" the second one said, and he claimed to have seen the female ANBU's eyes narrow. "I will notify the Hokage," she declared. "Now proceed." After the 2 cautiously made their way into the forbidden training ground, Yugao instantly pivoted on her heel and made her way directly to the Uzumaki/Namikaze's residence. In the meantime, at the specified place, while preparing dinner for the rest of her family in the kitchen, Kushina Uzumaki thought about her only son, Naruto. A sad expression came to her face as she recalled how she and Minato had ignored him in favor of their daughter, even yelling at him after performing an advanced chakra exercise called water walking. She didn't even know that the harsh words and tone she and her husband used had undoubtedly scared, perplexed, and wounded him until he ran away with a terrified and afraid expression on his face. She went to his room that evening because she wanted to apologize, but what she saw there just made her regret what she had done. Rewind, Naruto's room. As Kushina approached the door leading to her son's bedroom, she slowly turned the knob before opening it. Upon entering, she saw that Naruto was not on the bed and initially thought he had fled, but then she noticed his mop of blonde hair on the opposite side. She froze and her eyes glistened with unshed hair when she saw her young son sitting against the wall, legs curled up, and his arms tightly wrapped around them, as though he was expecting to be hit. The former Uzushio native said, "Naruto," as she crouched down and cautiously moved forward, reaching her hand forward and placing it lightly on his shoulder. After noticing that he was sound sleeping, Kushina got up and drew his bed's covers back. She then leaned down to pick him up carefully so as not to wake him, placed him gently on the mattress, took off his sandals, and covered him with the blankets. She knelt and ran her fingers through his hair after noticing the tears on his cheeks and feeling humiliated at herself and Minato for overreacting that afternoon. She shook her head at that, saying, "No, there's no excuse, but please know that I still love and care about you, and I wouldn't allow anything to happen to you." "I'm sorry, Naruto," she said, remaining silent so as not to wake him. "Me and your father didn't mean to react the way we did, we were just," she said. Then she stretched out and kissed her son's forehead. She rose up, a single tear streaming down her cheek as a little, melancholy smile appeared on her lips. "I'll talk to your father about this," she said. "We'll try to spend more time with you if we can, alright, especially me," she added. "Good night, my little maelstrom," she declared, "I will always love you." She then silently left the room to let her son to sleep. End of flashback. Since then, she has made an effort to be there for her kid, but he consistently left early in the morning and was seldom seen. In addition, Shinri's training sessions took up a lot of her time. She had also spoken with Minato, who concurred that what they had done to their son was excessive. He also attempted to develop a closer relationship with Naruto, but the boy was simply too busy, and he also had to train Shinri. Nevertheless, they made a commitment to themselves that they would attempt to strengthen their relationship with their son as soon as they had more time. The arrival of her husband and daughter interrupted her thoughts, with the former being carried on his back because she had overtrained herself. The red-haired mother merely sighed at her daughter's desire to gain strength. Once more, she asked Minato, who let out a sigh. "Yep," he replied, and Shinri smiled sheepishly. The carbon replica of Kushina said, "Sorry Ka-chan," as Minato set her down. Despite being somewhat spoiled due to her parents' preference for her over her brother Naruto, Shinri wasn't as conceited or spoiled as most spoiled kids were. She helped out around the house and occasionally tried to spend time with her brother, but she was never successful because he would always disappear. Additionally, Kushina noticed that Shinri was somewhat jealous of Naruto due to his newfound independence, but she also felt sorry for him after he was yelled at last year. With no disrespect to her close friend Mikoto or her oldest son Itachi, she grinned, pleased that her young daughter was not a prickly Uchiha. "It's alright, Shinri," she replied. "Why don't you go upstairs and get Naruto, dinner's almost ready." Minato sighed as he took his place at the table, and Shinri, with a sudden surge of energy, ran up the steps. When he said, "I don't know where she gets the sudden surge of energy," excluding the Kyuubi, Kushina laughed. She remarked, "You forget, Minato, that my clan folk are only tired for a minute, then feel great the next," as Minato's head sagged up. He complained, "Curse your longevity," which made his wife laugh. She then turned back to check on the food, but as she was doing so, there were several frantic bangs on the door. "Hokage-sama. Sensei. Get the door open," shouted the familiar voice of Kushina's student Yugugo, and by the sound of it, it was panicked. "It's important. Get out." After shutting off the stove and oven, Kushina and Minato started to go to the door when Shinri hurried down with a terrified expression on her face. "Ka-san. Hey to-san. Naruto isn't in his chamber." When she said that, the two parents started to worry since the knocking kept coming. "Sensei. Fucking open the door," Yugao yelled once more, and this time Kushina approached and opened the door, displaying her student wearing her ANBU gear and uniform, her mask off, and an angry, urgent expression on her face. "Yugao? What's the matter?" she inquired. When the purple-haired woman said, "It's Naruto," the mother and the rest of the family became extremely concerned. "What took place?" she said. "Where is he?" "He headed into Training Ground 44, he said, and the house was quiet at that, until—" "What?" Kushina shouted, her eyes wide in fear, along with Minato, whose eyes were wide at the mention of that training ground. "The Death Forest? How come he's in there, now afraid about his son, the Hokage?" The ANBU stated, with evidence of wrath on her face. "He felt he was unwanted, and he decided the best way to make you all happy was to leave." But he said that despite all the neglect, he still loved you all, she said. Naruto's sister and parents were taken aback by the remarks. Kushina wondered, unwanted? Naruto, you really think we didn't want you? As her pupil went on, and that's not all, apparently the village have been getting more and more brazen in their attacks on him, she was startled out of her reverie. At that, Kushina's head jerked up, attacked. Minato was similarly taken aback by her statement, as he was aware of the locals' strong animosity for his son but had not anticipated an attack. He clenched his hands upon realizing what an idiot he was. Yes, attacked, Yugao replied. And none of you didn't even notice. Before Kushina could respond, Minato put a hand on her shoulder. The fourth Hokage remarked, we need to concentrate on Naruto right now, so this isn't the time to argue, Kushina. Despite his desire to respond, Kushina nodded and approached Shinri. My shoujo, she said, your father and I are going to go collect your brother with Yuga-nichan. I want to stay here and lock all the windows and doors. Please don't let anyone in or out. Shinri gave Kushina a nod, walked to her and Minato's room, and returned wearing her Jonin uniform, her road to ninja attire, with her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She murmured, let's go, and Minato followed her out the door, closing it behind them. Now that she was by herself, Shinri peered out the closest window to see Yugao and her parents sprinting down the street. Oniai-san, please be alright. Alongside Naruto. As he made his way through the enormous trees of the notorious Forest of Death, Naruto was jumping from branch to branch. He had not yet encountered any of the terrifying creatures he had read about. Unaware that they were following a ruse, the ANBU that had been pursuing him each pursued one of his Kage Bunshin. Naruto remarked, well, at least my decoys have them going the wrong way, while Kibo only moaned. Yeah, that worked at least, the wolf replied, but now the things we have to worry about is the animals and the snake lady. Also, it's getting late, and despite your Uzumaki longevity, you need to find a spot to crash for the night, and I suggest someplace high up a tree. No, too obvious, answered Naruto, shaking his head. We need to find someplace where it will be easy to hide and harder for them to find, he said. Kibo was only able to blink and sigh, but his animal senses made him harden before he could do so. Naruto. Hold on, the Jinchuriki did exactly as the wolf said. What is it? Concerned by his friend's lack of response, Naruto added. We're being watched, and it's not ANBU or any other Konoha ninja, Kibo remarked, deeply frightened. I just caught a scent through you. It's wolf, but it's different. At that, Naruto blinked. How different? It smells strong, old prehistoric, Kibo growled slightly as his eyes widened. And they've surrounded us. At least 10 or 20 of them are odorous to me. Naruto's eyes widened as he drew a kunai while listening and scanning his surroundings. After a half-minute, he heard growls and snarls before at least 24 wolves emerged from the shadows. However, these wolves were different from the ones Naruto had read about because they appeared larger and more powerful. They appeared to weigh between 110 and 175 pounds, were nearly 5 feet long, and had fur that was the same color as that of regular wolves with a stripe of spinal bone running down the back. The anxious child, who was perspiring profusely, was soon surrounded by the wolves. Hey, Kibo, he remarked to his surrogate brother, would you be able to communicate with them if I allowed you to take over my body? Saying, I don't know, these guys are a different breed than what I'm familiar with, I can tell just by the smell, made the wolf uncomfortable. However, before Naruto could react, they heard a sharp howl from the alleged pack leader, who was slightly larger than the others and had a full white fur coat. His yellow eyes were piercing his own. Naruto remarked, "Oh man, this doesn't look good," as the wolf started to move toward him. "Naruto, if I can tell by the scent, that's the matriarch of the pack. Kneel down, or she'll attack you," Kibo remarked as his container blinked. In order to avoid being mauled to death by the she-wolf, Naruto followed Kibo's advice and knelt down. The wolf then proceeded to approach Naruto before halting in front of him and sniffing him up and down. "Okay, this is getting weird," Naruto thought uneasily. As the wolf kept sniffing, Kibo whispered, "Just relax," and then its eyes widened and it started to back off. Nervous and perplexed by the she-wolf's behavior, Naruto's eyes blinked. Well, what comes next? He pondered as the wolf turned and appeared to stare at the other wolves, causing them to retreat and return to the forest. The female wolf then turned to face Naruto and startled him by jerking her to the side, seemingly instructing him to follow her. "What ought we to do?" Kibo simply shrugged when the young blonde said. The son of the Kyuubi stated, "We got nothing better to do, let's follow her," and Naruto reluctantly started to follow the white she-wolf. In the meantime, in a different area of the forest, the voice, which belonged to none other than Kushina Uzumaki as she sliced through numerous ferocious creatures in the forest of death that were stupid enough to obstruct her path, screamed, "Get the hell out of my way," as a giant mantis fell to the ground with its head severed. Her spouse Yugao, a few other ANBU members, and Anko Mitarashi, the solitary resident of the training grounds, followed her. They remained behind as Kushina used a borrowed sword from one of the ANBU to slice, dice, or use any kind of jutsu on the unfortunate creatures. With a faint trace of terror, Anko remarked, "Oh man, I know I can be sadist, but even I know not to mess with a mother, who is a strong S-rank kunoichi by the way," as she saw Kushina crush a large bear's skull in when it attempted to swipe at her. Minato could only watch in concern as he saw his wife's condition. He knew she was frantic to find Naruto, just as he was, but he could also see that she was growing tired and had expended a lot of her chakra. He needed to take action to prevent her from hurting herself. He said, "Kushina, please stop. We have to go back," as he witnessed her using her chakra chains to strangle another mantis before slamming it to the ground and turning around to face them angrily. She backhanded a large green lizard that was going to strike her in the face, causing the creature to fall to the ground and lose its eyes. "I'm not leaving Naruto out here in this damn place. I'd rather rot in hell than go back without him," she argued. "I want him back as much as you do," replied Minato. "But with you overusing your chakra, and your current condition, you could end up killing yourself." Kushina was only able to narrow her eyes as she continued to advance. By this point, every creature had fled in terror from the red-haired woman's fury. She gasped as she felt a chop to the back of her neck, her senses not alerting her because she was focused on getting her kid back, and she fell to the ground unconscious. "You all can go back if you want, but I'm no ugh," she said. Yugao groaned and went to Minato, who was walking over and picking his unconscious wife off the ground with a sorrowful expression on his face. "I'm sorry, sensei, but for Naruto and Shinri's sake, I have to stop you," Yugao replied. "Come on everyone," he replied, "we'll continue looking for Naruto in the morning." As they left the location, the group of shinobi disappeared, and Minato's final thought was, "Naruto, stay safe. Naruto is back." Naruto yawned as he continued to pursue the wolf since he was exhausted and it was beyond his bedtime. "How much more do we have to go, man?" As they walked on, he thought, I can hardly keep my eyes open. Just hang on for a little longer, Naruto, Kibo remarked. I have a feeling we don't have to wait much longer. Naruto rubbed his eye and remained silent for another 10 minutes until the she-wolf halted between two trees and let out a howl that startled him out of his half-sleep walk and forced him to run toward the she-wolf's location. His eyes widened as he saw what appeared to be a wall enclosing a number of buildings. However, because of the overgrown grass and the vines growing on the walls, it appeared to have been abandoned for a long time. However, he was also taken aback to see that there were at least dozens of wolves living outside the walls. He remarked, "Well, this is something new," before the she-wolf pushed him forward and he proceeded to go forward with the wolf behind him. The other wolves gave him a questioning look as their matriarch trailed behind. As they passed past the gate of the expansive estate, the blonde thought, "I have a bad feeling about this." Kibo replied, "You're not the only one," as they made their way down the street toward the main edifice, which appeared to be a scaled-down version of the Hokage Tower but was half covered with vines and stone gray in color. Two wolves were standing guard, and when he stopped and was pushed by the she-wolf once more, the guard wolves sprang to their feet and started growling menacingly. The matriarch stepped forward and let out a series of little growls and barks, and the two guards retreated. Then, the wolf turned to face Naruto, and to his surprise, the wolf said, "Inside human," in a distinctly female voice, yet its mouth remained motionless, indicating that it was telepathic. The wolf nodded as the blonde asked, "Why you can talk?" "Only through thoughts," the wolf continued, "and I heard every word you spoken to your tenant since I first saw you." Naruto's eyes widened at that, but before he could say anything more, the she-wolf told him to enter the building once more, promising to explain later. Since he had no other option and didn't want to annoy the she-wolf, he entered the building. The wolf led him through what appeared to be a house's living room before reaching a flight of stairs. Once they were inside, they found a bedroom that was in a reasonably good state, complete with a bed and other furnishings. The white she-wolf repeated, "Get some rest, child. When you meet the alpha of our pack tomorrow, all of your questions will be answered." Then she turned, but Naruto stopped her before she could leave. The wolf turned back to face him and responded, "Wait. Can you please, at least, tell me what your name is?" As the wolf stated, "It's Shere Khan, now, rest." Shere Khan then left the child alone himself in the room. Naruto sighed as he removed his backpack, laid down next the bed, and sat down, feeling astonished by how cozy it was. As he lay on the bed, he remarked, "Man, I was not expecting this, Kibo." "I know, bro," Kibo remarked, "but for now, let's sleep, we'll find out more in the morning." Naruto sat up, reached for his rucksack, and placed it on his lap after nodding. He then opened it and started searching through its contents until he found what he was looking for and took it out. He then put the framed photograph on the little chest next to the head of the bed. One tear fell from his eye as he considered whether he had made the correct decision. It was a picture of his family taken before his and Shinri's 5th birthdays, one of the few times when they were all equally happy as a family. Choosing not to think about it tonight, Naruto grabbed the bed's blankets, pulled them over his head, and dozed off. Kushina's eyes opened when she realized she was back in her family's living room, but the odd thing was that everything was black and white except for her. The bewildered woman stared at her hands with a shocked expression on her face. What's happening? Where am I? Her thoughts were interrupted when she heard two voices, one of which she instantly recognized as Minato's and the other as her own. They were shouting at someone, and when she heard this, her eyes widened and she hurried to the kitchen, where she saw the calendar and her heart fell. She knew this date all too well. Please, don't do that again. As the shouts outside grew louder, she shouted within. After that, she went to the back and opened it, only to be horrified to see herself, Minato, and Naruto in the backyard. Naruto was crying, and his whiskered cheeks were wet. The past Minato shouted at Naruto, "You stupid little bastard. What were you thinking using an advanced chakra exercise without our permission?" The younger blonde stammered, "But Tusen I," but the past Kushina gave her a harsh slap. The present Kushina winced as tears streamed down her cheeks and out of her eyes as the past Kushina screamed, "That's enough out of you. I can't believe a little shit like you would try to pull a stunt like this. No. Put an end to this. Stop, please," she pleaded with any god in the world to put an end to this torture, but it was in vain as the two ghosts of her and her husband kept yelling at Naruto, who was now sobbing while curled up in a ball. Then, to her dismay and anxiety, a menacing smile appeared on her and Minato's lips. The past Kushina stated, "It's clear that this little shit stain is uncooperative," and the past Minato nodded in accord. He responded, "Yes, and we know what happens to uncooperative brats," as the genuine Kushina watched in confusion. As past Minato produced one of his Hiraition kunai, Kushina pondered, "W8? What's going on? This is not right. We sent Naruto to his room." He replied, "And it's not anyone would care, the whole village already despises him, so they'll see this as a blessing rather than a murder," and Kushina's eyes widened in terror. Her alleged past self used her chakra chains to strung Naruto up by the neck before she could even think. He extended his arms and legs wide, his face now displaying genuine dread as he gazed at them. Naruto pleaded, "Keika-chan T2-chan please," but their smiles simply grew wider. "Sorry, Naru-chan, but we never wanted you. Shinri is our favorite, and we could always make her a new little brother," the other Kushina said in a sickly sweet voice. Then, with another chakra chain emerging from her back, the kunai tip sped at the 6-year-old, striking him in the shin, causing the young boy to scream in agony. The real Kushina was horrified by what had just transpired, which was obviously not the case. "This isn't what occurred. This is all wrong," the Uzumaki yelled at herself. Then, she witnessed Minato throw his trademark kunai behind Naruto before vanishing in a flash of yellow and resurfacing behind Naruto with a recognizable spiraling ball of chakra in his hand. Rasengan, after that, Minato struck Naruto in the back with the chakra ball, forcing the kid to scream in pain. "No! Quit!" Kushina screamed as she tried to help her son, only for something to grab her ankle. She looked down and saw what looked like a black vine wrapped around it. She reached for her kunai pouch, but was shocked to find it not there on her thigh, desperation taking hold as she clawed at it, trying to get free to save her child from this torture. "Let go of me." She turned around after hearing another scream, and her eyes widened as she saw another chakra chain impaling itself into Naruto's other shin, followed by 2 more to his forearms. Panic set in as the red habanero attempted to reach Naruto more desperately than before, but then another black vine grabbed her wrist and pulled it back. As the same thing happened to the past Minato, Kushina then saw the past Kushina transform into an ugly version of herself, with her skin being horribly burned, her red hair in a greasy mess, her teeth becoming razor sharp, and her eyes turning bloodshot demoni's yellow. 2 ninjato swords then emerged from the ground, their blades rusted and ancient. The now demon Kushina grabbed the sword and ripped the blade out of the earth, saying, "Now for the finishing touch," and Demon Minato did the same. Yes, it's time to put this vicious dog to sleep, for good. After that, he plunged the sword into Naruto's stomach, causing the young blonde to scream in agony. The demon Kushina then skipped over to the boy who was chained. As she watched the genuine one struggle, the ugly Kushina exclaimed, "Oh Naru-chan, Naru-chan. If only you've been a good boy, you wouldn't be having this punishment," she said. As this creature talked to her kid, Kushina could only snarl. However, what the demon Kushina said next caused her blood to ice. The ugly Kushina pushed the ninjato into Naruto's neck and muttered, "Now, you die," as the boy's eyes went blank and he choked on his blood. As Kushina witnessed the death of her beloved kid in front of her, her horrified expression was evident. "No, no, no," she screamed as Naruto struck the ground and the ugly forms of herself and Minato disappeared along with the vines and the chakra cords. The distressed mother hurried over to her kid right away and gathered him in her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks as she gazed at his tiny, motionless body. The world was dark all around them. "Naruto?" Naruto, the mother, seeing no reaction, rocked back and forth while holding her son's body as Kushina cried and attempted to wake him, but to no use, as his eyes were rolled back and lifeless. The words, "Naruto, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry," came out of her. Kushina jerked her head up and looked around when a small voice rasped, "Why?" but instead she heard her supposed dead child breathing raspily. She looked down at Naruto, and her eyes widened in horror as she saw his face, which had thicker whisker marks, 2 fangs coming from his mouth, and eyes that were a demonic red with a black pitless slitted pupil. "Why do you despise me?" When she woke up with a scream, sweat soaked her entire body and her clothes, and she realized she was in the family's master bedroom. Recalling the terrible nightmare she had, Kushina coiled against the head of the bed as the door flew open to reveal a worried Minato. "Kushina, are you okay?" As Yugao, 2 other individuals, Hiruzen Sarutobi and another ANBU wearing a shrew mask, watched Minato go to his wife, who appeared to have seen the devil himself. The 4th Hokage murmured anxiously, "Kushina?" Minato gently put a hand on her shoulder and murmured, "Kushina, talk to me." She jerked her head up and back-pedaled against the wall as a result. "Kushina, please relax." "It's me." Knowing he needed to act quickly, Minato muttered as he approached his wife, which seemed to frighten her even more. He then moved ahead and grabbed the obviously upset Uzumaki, who started to resist greatly. After gently repeating, "Shoo, Kushina, shoo," the blonde held her husband and started crying. "It's okay, Kushina. Now, tell me what happened," she urged. As she recalled the terrible nightmare, Kushina could not stop crying. Can't, it was so dreadful," between sobbing, she said, and Minato looked at the other ANBU. "Get Inoichi right away. Inform him immediately that I need him and that this is an emergency." The ANBU nodded and disappeared in a shunshin as the yondaime gave the command. Shinri entered at this point, worried about her mother. She started to say something, but Hiruzen interrupted and shook his head. "Your mother just had a nightmare, Shinri-chan," the retired Hokage said. "It would be best if you didn't disturb her right now." Shinri wanted to object, but because she knew she wouldn't win an argument, she just nodded and went with the sandaime. Yugao lingered and watched the sensei while Minato consoled him, wondering what the nightmare was about but also having a strong intuition about what or who it was about. When Inoichi came 20 minutes later and saw the condition of the former Jinchuriki, he realized right once that something was wrong. The head of the Yamanaka clan said, "Hokage-sama, I came as soon I was informed by the ANBU, in reference to the couple. Kushina had a nightmare, and based on how she woke up, I can only assume it was a horrible experience for her. And a good thing you did, Inoichi, Minato remarked, still holding his wife. Inoichi nodded while observing the sobbing Uzumaki as she repeatedly called out her son's name. He shook his head, fully aware of the Hokage's request. And you want me to use my mind transfer jutsu to see what her nightmare was, he continued. He turned to Kushina and said, yes, I need to know what it was about, to which his fellow blonde nodded. When Inoichi continued, Kushina, listen to me, the woman raised her head to show her red, puffy eyes and tear-streaked face. I know you just woke up from a nightmare, but I need to go into your mind and find out what it was. Can you relax so I can do this? Inoichi asked. Minato got up and gave the two some room as Kushina reluctantly nodded her head. Inoichi brought a chair to the side of the bed, then lifted his hands in the jutsu signature hand sign before turning limp and entering Kushina's head, which made the woman go limp as well. After 15 minutes, Inoichi and Kushina awoke with a start, the latter's expression displaying fear and dismay. He put his hand on his head to help him forget the hell he had just witnessed. Kami, have mercy, he muttered. What is it, Inoichi? Concerned, Minato assisted his wife in sitting up again. The leader of the Yamanaka clan could only gaze at him with a pale face and trembling eyes due to the sights he saw. He answered calmly but fearfully, I can only say this, Minato, you wouldn't like what I saw in there. That was so terrible that Minato could only blink. It terrified his ordinarily courageous love half to death. He then approached the Yamanaka, who appeared to be about to throw up. He firmly replied, let me see it, causing Kushina and Inoichi to jerk their heads in his direction. No, Minato. You shouldn't see it, Kushina pleaded, and Inoichi concurred. Believe in me and her, Minato. You'd rather not, as his fellow blonde nodded, he countered. Mintao remarked, you're right, I don't want to, but then he narrowed his eyes and continued, I need to, because whatever it was that scared Kushina so much, it definitely concerns Naruto. So I am ordering you, Inoichi, let me see what you found in Kushina's mind, he said. Kushina worriedly glanced at her husband and said, Minato. At that, Inoichi blinked, but he could only do so while gesturing for him to sit. Don't say I didn't warn you, the leader of the Yamanaka clan warned, explaining what he had witnessed in Kushina's nightmare. As soon as they were done, Inoichi witnessed the reaction they had anticipated. Minato became pale and then grabbed the closest trash can and threw up. I don't even know how to describe it, he thought to himself, that was, sweet Kami in heaven. The Hokage then got to his feet, moved over to the bed, and embraced his wife. Listen to me, Kushina, what you and I saw in that nightmare wasn't us, he whispered to her. That never happened, and it will never happen, would rather kill you and myself before we ever hurt one of our children, especially Naruto. As Minato turned to face Inoichi, Kushina simply started to cry more. Thank you, you can go home now, Inoichi, he murmured, and the guy nodded before walking away while Yugao watched. That nightmare scared 2 S-rank and 1 A-rank shinobi. What could it be? In the meantime, Training Ground 44. One particular blonde Jinchuriki was still asleep when his door opened as morning broke over the forest of death. 3 pairs of yellow eyes peered inside and noticed the person on the bed. Unaware that 3 individuals were approaching him, Naruto stayed on the bed. When they reached the foot of the bed, they knelt down and then, as one, leaped on the sleeping 7-year-old. The outcome was clear. Eh! Naruto screamed as he felt the weight of something furry, and smells like the forest, on him. What the? Hello? Leave me alone. The three creatures that attacked him were three wolf pups, and their colors matched those of the other wolves he had seen the previous evening. However, there were a few little variations. One had two white stripes that resembled claws on its shoulders, another had a brown circle around its eye, and the final one had eyes that were heterochromic, one brown, the other yellow. Come on, guys. Leave. The dog with the heterochromic eyes then talked to Naruto in a young girl's voice as he yelled once more. Get up and at 'em. Shiken-sama dispatched us to get you up, the dog yelled, then grabbed him by the hand and pulled him from the bed. Ah! Release my hand. They led Naruto out of the main building, down the main road, and then turned left and left the small compound. The other wolves saw the funny scene and Naruto thought he heard a few snickers. The blonde shouted again, but the young pup ignored him and continued to pull the young blonde out of the room, with the other wolf pups right behind. After a few minutes, they reached a small hill with a cave opening large enough for a caravan to file into. Shere Khan and two other wolves were outside the cave. The young pups placed the fugitive blonde in front of Shere Khan, who watched indifferently. I presume you had a good night's sleep, kid, Shere Khan said, and Naruto nodded as he rubbed his fingers and gave the female pup who had pulled him all the way here a fierce look. He said, yeah, I did, but did you need to send your tiny goons to retrieve me? I swear I was afraid she would tear my hand off. The dog simply gave a naive glance. I was only doing what I was told, she added pleasantly, and Shere Khan intervened before Naruto could respond. You'll have enough time to maul each other later, the she-wolf replied, for now, the alpha wishes to see you, child. At that, Naruto scowled. My name is Naruto, you know, he remarked, and the she-wolf gave him a look. She replied, of course, now, follow me, Naruto. Geez, does she have to talk like a drone, said Naruto as his eye twitched, but Shere Khan responded. She uttered the words, I heard that, and Naruto felt a shiver run down his spine. A mental yawn caught his attention. It would be best not to piss her off, Naruto, Kibo stated while stretching in the mindscape. She could tear us limb from limb, and I prefer to live long after I get my 9th tail, he added. You're not helping here, Naruto thought to himself as he followed the she-wolf into the cave, the three puppies trailing after. After 10 minutes of walking through the tunnel, Naruto wondered why they hadn't yet experienced complete cave darkness. Before he could ask, he noticed light at the end of the tunnel, and the group of 4 wolves and 1 Jinchuriki soon arrived in what appeared to be a large cavern with a hole in the ceiling that let sunlight in. Naruto looked around and noticed more wolves, who were observing him warily. Well, Naruto reasoned, at least they're not trying to eat me yet, but Kibo abruptly reprimanded him. Naruto, don't jinx us. Anything that can happen will happen, yelled the wolf Bijou. Naruto rolled his eyes and said, okay, geesh, I'm sorry. His train of thinking was cut short as he noticed Shere Khan halting in front of what appeared to be a podium made of rocks. As soon as she did, the Jinchuriki stopped, and the group waited for another wolf to appear. This one had black fur, was slightly larger than Shere Khan, and had a vertical scar across his closed right eye. The other eye was yellow-brown, and it looked at the boy with the blonde hair closely. Well, young human, the wolf remarked in a gruff, but strong voice, I'm amazed you managed to survive the forest where we made our home, ever since Shere Khan informed me about you, but I'm curious to say why you came into the forest of death, when others have second thoughts. Naruto sighed, knowing in some way that sharing his experience might make things a bit difficult. Outside the seemingly deserted compound, a lone 12-year-old boy with blue eyes, blonde hair, and whiskers was practicing a kata for a taijutsu style he had discovered in the library of the aforementioned complex. He was 5 feet 4 inches tall and wore a forest green jacket with burnt orange stripes down the sleeves over a black t-shirt, black shinobi pants with white tape around the ankles, and dark brown ninja sandals. This was Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, a preteen who was now prepared to leave the forest and return to the village. He had made a few trips back to the village, but he had only stayed for 30 minutes and had stayed in the shadows to avoid detection. He had stayed at the compound, where his friends, the Hizunokami, had helped him after he told them how he had fled from home because he felt unwanted and wanted to get stronger. He even revealed to the Alpha's curiosity and the others' shock. The Alpha then came up to him, sniffed him a few times, looked into his eyes, nodded, and told him that he had told the truth. Then he identified himself as Sabakiba, the Alpha of the Hizunokami, and explained that he and his pack were the last of their kind after being brutally hunted down by poachers and ninja who saw them as a threat. He also explained that they were saved and protected by a clan of samurai ninja, known as the Yasurii, who took them to the Forest of Death prior to the founding of Konoha. The Yasurii were able to communicate with animals through telepathy, and they taught the wolves how to do it. Before Hashirama Senju established the village, the wolves and humans lived in harmony. Makuzai, the clan leader of the Yasurii at the time, instructed the pack to remain in the compound while he erected a genjutsu barrier that prevented anyone from entering the grounds unless they were brought there by the locals. This is why, despite Konoha's sponsorship of every Chunin exam, no one had ever located the location. Sadly, the Yasurii never came back, leading the pack to believe they were exterminated. After hearing this story, Naruto was in awe. He then asked the pack's alpha what would happen to him. Sabakiba replied that Naruto could use whatever he needed to train, but he was not allowed to go to the nursery because that was where the newborn cubs were born. Naruto nodded in agreement, understanding that a pregnant wolf giving birth was more dangerous and protective and would kill him without hesitation. Naruto has been living, training, sleeping, and learning at the former Yasurii compound for the past 5 years. He even became friends with the 3 wolf pups, Kokashiku, also known as Koka, Basho, and Katatsum. Naruto got to know the 3 like he would have with any dog in the Inuzuka clan, and the 4 gained notoriety for their mischievous behavior. In reference to the 3, oof. The blonde was forced onto his back by 3 brown blurs, and as the 3 dogs licked his face, he laughed and begged them to stop. As Naruto heard their laughter in their brains, he yelled, "Okay guys. Settle down. No, not there." Eventually, the 3 ceased torturing the Jinchuriki. "Sabakibajiji wants to see you, Naruto," stated Koka, "says it's time for you to return to the village." With a gloomy sigh, Naruto murmured, "Return, huh?" He had been experiencing bad dreams about when he would go back home. The blonde shinobi in training pondered whether his family would ignore him or react negatively to his appearance. Yell in rage? What the heck? He was unaware. Not knowing what else to do, he kept his mouth shut when a group of the villagers attacked him and threatened to kill him if he ever told his family about the abuse he was receiving. He was also afraid that his parents would look down on them if he told them about it. One thing is certain, though, he was ready to inflict misery on any villager who dared to challenge him. Although he wasn't ready to take on shinobi of a higher rank than a jonin, he was powerful enough to take on any chunin. In addition to learning taijutsu and kenjutsu techniques from the Tessuriai's collection of jutsu scrolls, he discovered that the clan were knowledge seekers who went out and returned scrolls, books, tomes, and other relics to their compound. A set of swords called the Kazuhocho was one of these artifacts. It included 2 swords, a regular katana, and a wakizashi, the latter of which was ideal for him because he needed to grow out a bit more to use the katana. He kept the wakizashi in a storage seal on his left forearm during storage. He also discovered religious, astronomical, and other items that would drive any village in the elemental nations insane and spark a war. He now understood why this compound needed to be kept secret, not only to protect the wolf pack, but also to shield the knowledge treasure from those who would abuse it. He stood up and started to follow his 3 companions to where Sabikiba was after he sighed and shook his head at these memories. After 5 minutes, when Naruto initially arrived here, the old pack leader was standing in the same cave, so it didn't take long to locate him. Naruto told the elderly wolf, "You wanted to see me, Sakiyajikan," and the wolf turned to gaze at the blonde with his keen eye. "You know I don't like that nickname," he growled and replied. "Sorry, but you know I like to call you instead of Sakikaba-sama, so it won't make you think you're arrogant," Naruto answered honestly, scratching the back of his head shyly. The old wolf groaned in resignation, and the 3 puppies snickered. "What's the point?" He was thinking. "Aside from that, I asked for you to meet me, because I believe it is time for you to return to the village." Naruto winced slightly at that. I don't think I can, Sabiyaji," he said uneasily, looking down with his hair shading his eyes as his 3 friends and Kibo stared at him with concern. What if things hadn't changed with the villagers? What if my parents will still ignore for my sister? What if, he said, interrupted by something knocking him down. He looked up to see that it was Koka, who was giving him the wolf glare for which she was notorious and would frighten any elite jonin, including Kakashi Hatake. She growled, "You listen to me, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze." The blonde gulped, and the 2 young male wolves all stared at the she-wolf in disbelief. Sabikiba, on the other hand, was expressionless. "Me and the others have known you for 5 years, and now you're gonna chicken out. Sorry, but I won't settle for that. You trained your butt off ever since you got here, so you could protect yourself from those idiots in the village. You also want your parents to notice and love you, right? So stop being a wimp, grow a pair, and show them the fruits of your labor." Naruto was taken aback by his friend's remarks and knew deep down that she was correct. He should not be alarmed by what might occur in the future. Instead, he should concentrate on the present and consider the result later. As he sat up and gave Koka a stroke on the head, a tiny smile appeared on his face. "Thanks, I needed that," he murmured, turning to face the older wolf. "I think I'm ready to head home now," he continued. If wolves were capable of that in any case, Sabikiba smiled slightly but visibly. Naruto grinned and nodded in agreement as the alpha stated, "Then go, young Naruto, show your village that you're no longer a defenseless target, and what happens when a wolf is cornered," before turning to face his friends. "Let's get going then, shall we?" In the meantime, returning to Konoha, home of Uzumaki Namikaze, the only person in the Yondaime Hokage's house was Kushina, who was standing by the window and gazing out toward the forest of death with a solemn expression on her face. It was quiet in the house, and Minato was at the tower carrying out his duties as Hokage, while Shinri was at the Ninja Academy getting ready to graduate in a few months. Her kid had been gone for 5 years due to abuse, neglect, grief, and hurt caused by the wretched villagers who had the audacity to harm him. When the villagers learned that Naruto had run into the forest, there were celebrations in many of the bars and stores that wrongfully hated him. Naturally, because of the inebriated state of these idiots, Minato and Kushina also learned that Naruto had not told them about his abuse. It seems that the mobs that had trapped and beaten him had threatened to kill their son if he told his family or those who had shown him kindness. The village council members also assisted in keeping the abuse of their son a secret. Following this, Minato and Kushina killed the shinobi directly involved, with the former using Hiraishin Ver-2 to vent his rage and Kushina using her chakra chains and half of the Kyuubi chakra. They then sent the villagers who had injured Naruto to Ibiki, who made them sing like canaries and imprisoned them for 50 years. The civilian counselors threw a fit, but Minato shot them down and barred them from attending council meetings and shinobi affairs. However, that didn't make Kushina's heart or soul any better. She continued to have nightmares about Naruto being brutally murdered, then coming back to life with lifeless eyes and asking why she had left him. She once tried suicide after one of those awful nights, but was saved by her best friend Mikoto Uchiha. She was then put on suicide watch for 6 months until she eventually got her act together with the support of her husband and kid. Though Yugao claimed he didn't despise her or the rest of the family, Kushina knew Naruto would never trust them again, especially her, and a few tears came out of her eyes as she remembered the boy she had carelessly abandoned in the shadows. She'd spent a lot of time in her adored son's room, either letting out tears or making sure it was tidy when he got home. She thought, "I'm such a terrible mother, Naruto Sochi." A knock on her door prompted her to get up. She wiped the tears from her eyes and murmured, "I'll be right there," gently but loudly enough for the person on the other side of the door to hear. She grinned as she opened the door since her best friend from her genin days, Mikoto Uchiha, was standing on the other side. He asked, "Hey Mikoto, how are you today?" And the now Uchiha matriarch returned the smile, having known the woman for years. "You're undoubtedly wondering why Mikoto is still alive and the chief of the clan. I'm going to educate you. When the Uzumaki attempted suicide on the night that Itachi massacred the Uchiha clan, on orders from a very, and I mean very, reluctant Minato, she was visiting Kushina and was taken to the hospital. In essence, her tardiness saved her life and that of 2/3 of the clan. She was now leading the remaining members of the clan and assisting in the raising of her youngest son, Sasuke. Mikoto smiled back at Kushina, but she could see that her friend's smile did not reach her eyes, and she understood why. She added, "Hello Kushina, I just came over to see how you were doing, and how you were holding up," and she observed Kushina's involuntary wrist rubs. In a conceited attempt at humor, Kushina remarked, "I've been fine Mikoto, really, I'm not planning on offing myself anytime soon," and Mikoto sighed. Kushina, knowing that nothing escaped her best friend, Uzumaki said, laughing uneasily as she rubbed the back of her head. Mikoto could only shake her head. She was aware that Naruto's departure had been difficult for her and was growing increasingly impatient to see him again. As she led her companion to the living room of the house, Kushina moaned. "He will come back, Kushina, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but he will come back, I promise you that," she murmured. "I wish I was more confident about that," said the mother with depression, "but how would I know that he doesn't hate me for my part in his misery?" Monument to Hokage. Naruto exclaimed, "Well, here we are, for good this time," as he stood atop his father's head, surveying the hamlet he had left behind 5 years prior. "Yep, the village hasn't changed much, that's for sure," Kibo remarked, adopting Naruto's perspective to view the village. Blonde nodded as his three wolf companions materialized at his side. "Say, you think we'll meet that Hyuga girl we rescued a year back?" replied Basho. "We might, if I remember correctly. That girl had some serious confidence issues until Naruto set her straight, of course, after we beaten those Kyuubi pricks down," replied Katatsum. Koka said, not to mention the look in her eyes when she looked at Naruto, mentally smiling as she noticed the hint of scarlet on Naruto's face. The blonde Jinchuriki moaned, "Very funny guys, very funny," as he gazed down at the Hokage tower. He let out a hollowed-out sigh, knowing that he would have to face his family and answer numerous questions about how he managed to survive the forest. He turned back to his three Hizunokami friends and nodded while issuing a single command. "Let's go meet the old man." Office of the Hokage. There was still a lot of paperwork to go around, even if it had decreased because the public was prohibited from attending most council sessions. Minato sighed as he read another document that needed to be signed. He told himself, "How Sarutobi-sama survived this bullshit, I will never know," but he was certain that he would not sign anything that would result in Naruto being exiled or labeled a missing nin. After his son Naruto ran away from home and into Training Ground 44, often known as the Forest of Death, Minato and his family had been through a difficult 5 years. They had sent ANBU search groups there to find him, but they all returned exhausted, battered, and without anything. Then came his wife's suicide attempt, which was mercifully stopped by Mikoto, who survived the Uchiha massacre because of her husband Fugaku's coup attempt. Next came another attempt by Kyuubi to steal the Byakugan by kidnapping Hinata, but this time the Chunin sent to retrieve her were discovered alive, albeit with bruises and, to the surprise of the rescue team, bite marks from canine teeth. The Chunin were then sent back to Kyuubi with a warning not to attempt to steal the Byakugan again. To Hayashi's pride and the elders' concern, Hinata had been practicing constantly since that day, but she still wouldn't reveal who had saved her. Jiraiya then reported that Orochimaru had taken over Rice Country and established his own ninja village, and that he had seen an organization called Akatsuki with unknown goals. With every passing year, things became more frantic. He sighed and scratched the bridge of his nose. But in spite of everything, his son was the one thing that made him most uncomfortable. He and Kushina cursed themselves after learning from a few drunks how the village had beaten Naruto behind their backs and threatened to kill him, but he didn't follow through because he was too ignorant. His son would surely despise him now, and he was powerless to stop it. He was distracted from his thoughts as he heard a disturbance outside. "Young man, I told you. The Hokage is very busy right now. And I told you that no pets are allowed. I don't care what you say, you flat-chested weasel. And they're not pets, they're my familiars. I don't see you complaining about the Inuzuka bringing their Ninken in here. That's because they're an exception. And who are you calling flat-chested, you little punk? AHH. Call them off. Call them off. Let go of my arm, you mutt." When Minato heard his secretary screaming and the noises of snarling and fighting outside his office door, he blinked. "Release the seeker of. Damn Gaki AH." Minato and the ANBU protecting him jumped into taijutsu postures as the door smashed open and a Chunin's body flew through. As the people who had caused the noise entered, they stared. Minato saw one of them and his eyes opened, seeing a little replica of himself as a genin. The jacket was a different color, but, "Hey old man, surprised to see me?" As he fumbled over the name of his guest, Minato couldn't help but gape like a fish. "En Naruto?"